The motion is approved.
I move that we consider the budget of the judiciary and its attached agencies, Supreme Court of the Philippines and the lower courts, the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, the Sandigan Bayan, the Court of Appeals, Court of Tax, and the Court of Tax Appeals, and acknowledge the presence of its officials, justices, and officials of the judiciary, led by Supreme Court Associate Justice Samuel Garland, Supreme Court Associate Justice Jose Maigas Marquez, Court of Appeals Acting Presiding Justice Fernanda Lampas Peralta, Court of Appeals Justice Associate Justice Edwin Sorongon, Sandigan Bayan Presiding Justice Amparo Cabotaje Tang, Sandigan Bayan Associate Justice Carl Miranda, Sandigan Bayan Associate Justice Michael Frederick Musni, Court of Tax Appeals Presiding Justice Roman Del Rosario, CTA Associate Justice Corazon Ferrer Flores, Sandigan Bayan Associate Justice Bayani Jacinto, and Court Administrator Raul Villanueva. We now recognize the distinguished Senator Sonny Angara to sponsor the same, and Senator Pimentel to interpolate the budget of the judiciary.
The consideration of the budget of the judiciary, namely the Supreme Court of the Philippines, the lower courts, Presidential Electoral Tribunal, Sandigan Bayan, Court of Appeals, Court of Tax Appeals, and other executive offices is now in order. And likewise, we would like to welcome the Supreme Court Justices, the CA Justices, Sandigan Bayan Justices, and all the members of the judiciary to your Senate. Is there objection? There being none, Senators Aquilino, Coco Pimentel, our minority leader, is recognized for his interpellation. And Senator Angara, of course, our committee chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Majority Leader. We'd like to also manifest that the Honorable Justice Arthur Malabagyo of the Sandigan Bayan is also with us today. And we greet you and our colleagues a good morning, especially our brilliant top-notcher, brilliant lawyer in the Senate, Minority Leader Pimentel. For the record, Mr. President, the budget of the judiciary is 58,746,794,000 pesos under our committee report for the 2024 General Appropriations Bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our sponsor.
Yes, certainly, of course. Good morning, Minority Leader.
This is my favorite sector to interpolate on, Mr. President. But only because I'm a frustrated member of the judiciary, Mr. President. Naging member ako ng Senate, hindi member ng judiciary.
I think they should put forward your name to the JBC in 2025, Your Honor. You're very much qualified.
I was once upon a time a member of the JBC, Mr. President. And
As
I know,
chairman.
And I know the, I know also the difficult
But you should be on the other side, sir. You should be on the other side.
On the other side. Salamat po. And of course, no, not only that, that you know, we are related by affinity or even consanguinity with the judiciary, you know, kasi abogado tayo. But also, let me interpolate for the fact that I've always entertained in my mind, Mr. President, the question on who checks the judiciary. So I think this is the only time that we can check the judiciary. Kasi pagdating sa substance yata of their decisions, it's really the public now which will check the validity of the reasoning and the arguments of the decision by publicly discussing it and even to the point of criticizing. Is that correct, Mr. Sponsor? Can the public analyze the decisions of the courts and then also either agree with it, praise it, or even criticize it, Mr. President?
Yes, I think the Supreme Court, like other agencies of government, are not above public scrutiny. I think difference is that pending cases, there is a doctrine on commentary on pending cases, so as not to affect the decision and not to affect the dispensation of justice. And of course, it's a long-standing tradition. I think you were probably also a writer for the Philippine Law Journal, for instance, or maybe one of the law journals in the country, which routinely scrutinize the decisions of our courts, whether they make good law, especially if they are landmark cases and they lay down new doctrines or they overturn established doctrines, which is possible in the law, which is a dynamic body of decisions and statutes, Your Honor.
So thank you for that, Mr. President. So, and then itong proceedings natin dito would be to check on the performance of the Supreme Court and the other members of the judiciary and how they have used their budget. So, Mr. President, during our committee hearing, the entire judiciary family was asking for a reconsideration of 6.7 billion, if I'm not mistaken, 6.7 billion pesos. Ngayon, our committee report reflects an increase of 2.25 billion pesos. So, looks like we were not able to grant the entire request or the wish list of the judiciary. So, which ones, okay, number one, first question, yung 2.25 increase po ba natin was pursuant to the 6.7 billion request of the judiciary? And then, so which ones, if yes, which of those in the 6.7 billion requested did our committee grant, and which are the more important ones which also, or the other important requests which we were not able to fund?
Thank you, distinguished Minority Leader. Well, it's been customary for us, of course, to solicit from the judiciary what their wish list is or requests, since oftentimes the NEP does not accommodate their full wish list, Your Honor. So in this case, you're correct. I think they have a wish list of at least 6 billion, and the committee was able to grant, I think, between 1 to 2 billion of that, and of course we coordinated with them, Your Honor. For the Supreme Court, there is an increase of 1.286 billion, 200 million, broken down as follows. Good morning to our distinguished Senate President, the head of the Institution Center, Juan Miguel Zubiri. Of the 1.286 billion, distinguished Minority Leader, 200 million is for the judiciary marshals, 221 million is for the hazard pay of judges, 536 million is for the phase 4 of the establishment of the family courts, Your Honor, and then there is another 329 million for the additional positions for the Office of the Chief Justice and the Office of the Associate Justices. And for the Sandigan Bayan, there is an additional item of 448.2 million, of which is broken down as follows: 5.6 million for the creation of new positions, 395.2 million for other personal benefits, 34.6 million for the upgrading and reclassification of positions, 10.2 million for hazard pay, 2.5 million for PhilHealth contributions. For the Court of Appeals, there is an increase of 234 million for other personal benefits. For the Court of Tax Appeals, there's an increase of 287.9 million, broken down as follows: for the lump sum for the creation of new positions, 15.8; for the 70 unfilled positions, 13.9; lump sum for reclassification of positions, 7.1; lump sum for casual personnel, 1.1; lump sum for step increments for the length of service, 10.3; other personal benefits, 234.5; and health insurance premiums, 5.1, totaling 287.9 million, Your Honor.
So those were the PAPs to be funded by the increases given by our committee. Tama
Yes,
po
Your
ba?
Honor.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
So among those requested by the judiciary, Mr. President, which are the more important ones which we are not able to fund for 2024? Para lang po sa guidance natin to, tsaka parang we anticipate the next budget cycle.
Well, the biggest item on their items for reconsideration, Your Honor, is the lump sum for reclassification of positions. The total there is around 3.53 approximately 3.53 billion, Your Honor.
Well, is this a project? They will study
This is-
the ano tawag mo doon?
Yeah, it's for
The bureaucracy, the positions, and then
It's for the upgrading of existing positions in the first and second level courts, Your Honor. Lower courts.
okay, so the Supreme Court will change the staffing pattern of
The salary grades, parang SSL ng
salary
judiciary
grades.
ko. Parang ganun.
Okay.
Ang dating sa akin. Oh.
By
Parang SSL
ano
siya.
siguro?
Kasi existing positions po siya, pero itataas po yung compensation ng mga positions. Oh.
Okay. Okay, but ganito ba sa judiciary, may existing position, meron kayong, you have your own nomenclature for your positions, and then may counterpart siya sa SSL. Ganun, iangat natin. Imbis na lower position in the SSL, we will use now a higher position. Ganun po ba yan? Ganun?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ah.
I would like to add, not only the compensation, but even the classification will change. I think they even want to, pati yun papasukin po nila. Po.
Thank you po. And that amount is for the study? Just for the study? Or for the execution?
It's for the actual implementation.
Okay, so that mga ano na po. That would be the budgetary effect. Mr. President, Article 8, Section 3. Babasahin ko po. Hindi na to para sa members of the judiciary, kabisado nila ito. For the public, the judiciary shall enjoy fiscal autonomy. Appropriations for the judiciary may not be reduced by the legislature below the amount appropriated for the previous year, and after approval shall be automatically and regularly released. Okay. Ito po bang amount natin sa committee report natin? Assuming this is the amount carried over to the GAA 2024 of 58,746,794. Will this now be that floor referred to by that fiscal autonomy provision for the judiciary? That is now the amount which the legislature must respect henceforth, Mr. President, as the floor amount for the budget of the judiciary?
Your Honor, it would seem so from my cursory reading of the provision. But in practice, I've encountered years where the DBM doesn't see it as so, and it does not include non-recurring programs in that. Meaning, if there is a project for capital outlay, like a building, for instance, in 1 year, it may not be included in the following year when they count the floor, as you mentioned, or as you use the term. Your Honor.
So, in other words, Mr. President, I'm asking for, my question really is, are there non-recurring items in the said budget, Mr. President? If yes, what would this be and how much? In what vicinity? Para lang po alam natin.
Yes, there's a non-recurring capital outlay item for construction of courts of around 1.2 billion, Your Honor.
1.2.
Billion.
So, yun lang bale. Yun lang ang pwede natin ibawas dun sa 58.7 billion minus 1.2 billion because it's a capital outlay building siya and then non-recurring. So, technically speaking, 57.5 billion would be the amount which would constitute as the floor, and Congress should be conscious of that amount because we cannot fall below that amount in next year's budget for the judiciary.
I think so, Your Honor. I believe that's correct. I just, of course, I have to really go into the budget and scrutinize each single item, but looking at it initially, I think you're correct, Your Honor.
Sige, at least yung vicinity, alam na natin
Yes, that's the ballpark, Your
the
Honor.
budget of the judiciary is now more than 50 billion pesos a year, Mr. President, or maybe 55 billion pesos a year.
Yes, Your Honor.
Alam nyo ba na ang budget ng eleksyon kasing mahal po ng budget ng judiciary?
Sa COMELEC ko.
Ganyan na po kamahal ang eleksyon natin ngayon. Please double check it. Nakahati lang sa 2 taon sa 2 taon, kaya hindi natin napapansin. pag isuma total po natin, we are actually, ang election natin, one election, we are already is 1 year's maintenance of our judicial system, Mr. President.
Well,
So-
what is the better investment, Your Honor?
Yes, that's it. Mr. President, I think masyado na pong
Magastos.
magastos na.
Hindi pa ho kasama siguro dyan ho yung sa ginagastos ho ng kandidato.
Masyado na magastos na po. Yan ang napansin ko. Actually, alam ko 50 billion na ang judiciary. Napansin ko rin sa election, 50 billion na. That's too much. I don't think we ever imagined it to be that way, no? To hold an election na parang isang ano na yun, 1 year ano na yun, efficient and effective judicial system. Well, there was an issue raised, Mr. President, about a special provision, committee report natin, na naayos po natin ito sa ating, sa committee hearing na raise ito, naayos na po ito sa, I think there were two special provisions, number 2 and number 7. Have we fixed this in the committee report?
Yes, they just asked for some revisions in the wording of some of the special provisions, Your Honor. The first is for the SADs, or the Special Allowance of Justices and Judges. The second is for the special provision on the MOE of the lower courts by restoring the wording to what was contained in previous year's GAAs, or General Appropriations Acts, Your Honor.
What would be the big difference, Mr. President, if we were to retain the NEP special provision number 2 wording? What would be the effect on the budget implementation for the judiciary? Anong mali? In other words, anong mali doon at bakit pa ulit-ulit rene-retain po ng DBM? Yun po ang lumalabas na special provision. Tapos amend lang ng amend pagdating sa Congress.
Well, it would hamper the judiciary in giving these special allowances and justices. They have more flexibility under the version that appeared in the GAA 2023, Your Honor.
In what sense po yun? Kasi para po maintindihan talaga namin, so that siguro i-advisean na namin kami, kasi para hindi masyadong involved ang Supreme Court sa lawmaking, it would be the legislators who will now advise the DBM to
Actually,
update or upgrade the wording for
I
future.
think it's been revised for the last decade already.
I know, that's kaya
If I'm not mistaken, naabutan ko na rin lang to. Your Honor, baka mas kabisado nyo pa nga ito kaysa sa akin. Being the former or the long-standing chair of the Senate Committee on Justice, I think there was the DBM wants the SAD to cease to exist, Your Honor, but it's already, it's kind of, in the legal profession, there's a lot of traditions. So parang tradition na ng judiciary ho yun, yung SAD. So, and given their fiscal autonomy, given the provisions you're aware of and you've read in the Constitution, parang, in my personal opinion, I'm sure in many of our colleagues' opinion, yun pa rin yung nararapat.
Siguro, Mr. President, if I can request Justice Raul Villanueva to brief us about this, the two special provisions, kung paulit-ulit na sila ng 10 years, kami na ang intervene with the DBM, kasi part of lawmaking yun, para insulated po ang Supreme Court influencing policy.
Yes, they will submit, Your Honor.
Just brief us, hindi ko rin masyadong mag-gets. Ano ba ibig sabihin nito? Kung sinunod natin yung NEP ng DBM, bababa ang sweldo ng ating members of the
If I may be
judiciary.
allowed to read a portion of their position paper, Your Honor, I think this is the most relevant provision or pertaining to this special provision number 2. To withdraw the SAJ or special allowances at 100% as of June 30, 2007, presently being enjoyed by members of the bench would put them at exactly the same position they were in before the effectivity of RA 9227 with their salaries, though increased under successive SSLs, at the same level as other government lawyers, which would defeat the purpose of Republic Act 9227, which was enacted for the purpose of attracting lawyers to the judiciary, as can be gleaned from the sponsorship speech of then Senator Renato Cayetano. I'll omit that portion, but basically the intention is to attract the brightest lawyers. I think at the time the context was there were a lot of vacancies sa judiciary, so they increased the salaries. So the judiciary gave magkakaroon parang wage distortion, di ba? Parang yun ang nangyari, may nagkaroon ng wage distortion. So the newly hired lawyers, if they did not give the SAJ, parang may distortion sa compensation ng mga lawyers in the judiciary, Your Honor. Basically, if try to put it as briefly
And
as possible.
these SAJJ funds come from what source, Mr. President?
Well, there's a portion, traditionally it comes, historically there's a portion that comes from the GAA, and there's also a portion which comes from the collection of fees by the judiciary, Your Honor.
Ayun na nga. So, tama, hindi na natin galawin yun.
So pera na rin na ho nila yun.
Hindi na po
In other
natin-
words, that's another reason now that you brought it up. Pera rin ho nila yun. So how they dispose of it, I think that's in accordance with fiscal autonomy. At tama yung ginagawa ho natin na tinatanong natin sila ano yung nararapat dito, ano yung magandang gawin dito. Dahil they're in the best position, I feel, Your Honor, to dispose of this.
Since we have already discussed another source of funding for the judiciary, may we, for the record state, what are the other sources of funds for the judiciary, Mr. President?
Same source. They have what they call the JDF and the SAJF, which we mentioned, and these are all collected from fees, filing fees, legal fees, Your Honor, and the total collection, for instance, of the JDF from January to June of this year, first half, is 453 million. For SAJF, it's 1.1 billion, rounded off, Your Honor.
So, if I were to add the JDF, SAJF, so 450 million and 1.1 billion, so lagyan na lang natin sa 1.5 billion. That would be the total filing fees, docket fees collected by the judiciary for a certain calendar year.
Yes, Your Honor. For toward this year, right? Yes.
Ganun lang po ganun lang po hindi ko rin masabing maliit kasi umabot din ng bilyon, pero hindi rin po ganun kalaki pala ang ating docket fee collections.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is this representative of a calendar year's docket fee collections?
Yes, Your Honor.
1.5 billion. Kasi po, ang isa sa mga...
As of June lang ho, they're expecting more for the rest of it. As of June lang ho yun.
Ayun, so is it
For the first
reasonable
half.
to expect double? So
Yes, that's
3
reasonable,
billion
Your
for
Honor.
1 year?
That's
For 1 year.
reasonable.
Kasi Mr. President, isa sa mga reklamo, so siguro paabot na rin natin ang reklamo ng taong bayan sa ating justice system. The usual, may mga usual, pero meron din nagsasabi kasi masyadong mahal din na Mr. President ang docket fees po natin, how to compute the docket fees. Is the Supreme Court aware of such a complaint? May reklamo bang ganyang umaabot o lahat can afford?
Yes, in fact, they have a legal fees committee which has been constituted to look into the fees, the amount of fees being charged, Your Honor.
Yes, please. Sana with the with the intention of making them more reasonable. Mas abot kaya kasi parang ano rin po yun, access to courts din po yun, access to judiciary. Magkano po ba ngayon ang ano? Kunyari,
Yes. That is part of their overall goal of improving access to justice, Your Honor, and rationalizing the fees. I think it's the direction you're also.
generally speaking, Mr. President, kunyari, 1 million ang damages na hinihingi ng complainant. Magkano pong docket fee nun?
1/10 of 1%, Your Honor. So kung 1% yun, 1 million, 1/10.
Huh? 110?
Would be 1,000, Your Honor.
1,000?
1,000. 1/10 of 1.
Yes, 110 to 1%. It's a million, 1 million damage claim. You pay a docket fee of 1,000. Are we sure about that?
Yeah, it's 1,000, Your Honor.
110.
Opo.
110 to 1. Huh?
We made a lucky guess and it's 1,000, Your Honor.
Huh?
Because we made a lucky guess and it's 1,000, Your Honor. 1,000. 1/10 of 1% is 1,000.
Yes, that's it.
That is the fee, Your Honor.
Matagal tayo hindi nag-practice kasi, Mr. President. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, yes, if you can keep it reasonable, all the more, the better, Mr. President.
Yeah. It's roughly correct, but Justice Villanueva saying he'll give you the more exact computation, Your Honor.
Sana wala nang ibang wala nang dagdag. So, okay, Mr. President, ganito. Yung Special Provision 7, cured na po yan?
That is on the MOE of the lower courts, wherein paglabas po ng NEP, meron po silang formula already. I think they divided the total amount by the number of courts to be covered. So that's not really, and ang tingin ho ng hudikatura doon is hindi yon sangayon sa fiscal autonomy of the government. So they also have their own formula which they prefer to be followed, Your Honor.
Because naging one size fits all, vale? Kung
Yes,
yung
Your Honor. And minsan, you have a judge, for instance, who has more than one sala. Like I remember, nung congressman mo ako sa Aurora, ang may sako po noon, taga Nueva Ecija. So, I would think that judge needs more MOE dahil bumabiyahe ko siya, di ba? So,
Sige po, basta Justice Raul, kami na po yung magkakausap sa DBM to improve their system kasi siguro naka-cut and paste lang yan eh. So, pero kailangan kabisado muna namin yung topic, so paki-brief na lang po kami. But I'm willing to do that, Mr. President. Ayaw na natin.
tuwa ho sila, Your Honor.
Kasi nagiging ritual to every year, Mr. President.
At saka taon-taon ho yun.
Kaya nga rin,
Taon-taon.
nagiging ritual natin na paulit-ulit.
Parang hindi pinapakinggan mo kasi taon-taon binabalik ko. Pero siguro
Well,
alam na rin
okay.
po nila yun na ibabalik.
Mr. President, napansin namin sa judiciary family, meron tayong mga targets what we will dispose, etc., etc. Who sets the targets and how do the targets which are set affect the budget process?
It's the DBM apparently who gives the targets, Your Honor.
DBM?
Yeah, I was surprised also to find out, Your Honor.
No, ano ba disposition?
In consultation, Your Honor, with the courts, Your Honor. The court, Office of the Court Administrator.
Sample. Kasi napansin po namin, mababa ang targeting. Tapos, pagdating sa achievement sa actual, mas mababa pa sa tinarget. So parang, that kind of disappoints because akala ko when the budget was being set, was being estimated, ito yun, expected output, ganito. But ang real output yata natin, mas mababa pa sa expected. Example.
Your Honor, yung pag-dispose rin ho nila, it varies from year to year because minsan maraming kasong pumapasok, maraming na-file. Some years there are more cases filed than others. So that also affects the disposition of cases, Your Honor.
For example, Mr. President, what is the caseload of the Supreme Court?
The caseload of the Supreme Court, 6,000. Well, while we're waiting for the actual figure, Your Honor, for caseload, since we were talking about disposal, the target disposal for the year 2023 is 6,000. It has been at 6,000 for the last 5 years. And the good news is, as of June of this year, they've already disposed of 3,592. So they've exceeded their half-year target. If 6,000 is divided into 2, their target by June would be to dispose of 3,000. They had disposed of 3,592, which is 120%.
For year 2022, for example,
accomplishment.
Mr. President, how many cases were decided by the Supreme Court?
Well, in 6,000, for the 6,000 target, they decided, or they disposed of 3,279, Your Honor.
For year 2022.
Yes.
So yun, nakita natin, ano? Target, 6,000 pa rin.
Opo.
Full year disposition, 3,200. So, malayo. But
Yes,
this
yes.
time, this calendar year 2023, same target, looks like they have doubled the pace because 3,500 na tayo sa... Tama po ba yan?
Tama po. Tama po kasi nilampasan na ho nila yung
Nalampasan na last
yung
year's.
whole year
Correct.
disposal rate
Okay.
only in the first half of the year, Your Honor. So siguro
And this-
yung nabanggit na less cases were being filed and of course they were affected siguro by the disposal rate of the previous year and they sought to improve, Your Honor.
Correct, Mr. President. So, for how many years DBM, in consultation with the Supreme Court, has set the target for ano ba tawag dito? Case disposal rate at 6,000 per year. So, may I know the case load of the Supreme Court? As of the moment, for example,
Approximately 11,000 cases, Your Honor.
11,000. Is the target has the target ever been achieved, Mr. President, 100%?
In 2019, there was a 97% accomplishment rate, Your Honor. Out of the 6,000, there was disposal of 5,792
Okay.
cases, Your Honor. So that's a very high rate of...
Siguro, at saka yung target siguro na 6,000, talagang with the input of the Supreme Court na to, knowing their processes, that it really also takes time. Ito lang po, Mr. President, sometimes nababasa ko na a case decision promulgated in May, tapos it's just reported in November. O bakit gano'n na? Why such a long time lag, Mr. President? May mga ganyan eh. In a decision promulgated in May 2023 and then na-report lang po sa atin November 2023 na ilang June, July, August, September. 6 months po ang delay.
Yes, Your Honor. They acknowledge that sometimes it takes longer than it should. Sa pag-promulgate ho, pagka may decision na, although in theory agree na lahat, iniikot pa ho for signing. So parang sa atin, pinipirma po yung committee report. Medyo, yun ang ninanais nila na mapabilisan ho.
No, in that report, sir Mr. President, na promulgated siya May 2023. Ano ibig sabihin ng promulgated? Hindi po ba? It has already secured the majority or the needed number of concurrents?
Promulgated means na-agree na. They've all agreed on the decision, Your Honor. But the actual act of routing, the physical act of routing it and the physical act of signing it and again transferring it to the next office or official who needs to sign it, that takes some time according to them. Minsan ho, nagdi-dissent naman. So inaantay nila yung paglabas ho ng dissenting opinion. Ho.
So, yung parties po na involved, they have not been notified noong May. Kunyari, the decision is promulgated in May. There's no notification to the parties in May. Doon na siya. they are also not notified in December when it is released to the public. Ganun po ba yan?
Pag na-promulgate na ho, pwede nang ipaalam sa mga litigants ho, pero they don't get a copy yet until it is finally, all the opinions have been written, Your Honor, and it's been routed for signature.
Paano po yung, di ba may mga time to file an MR, paano? Does it run when they are notified or does it run sa...
It is upon receipt of the hard copy of the decision. So hindi naman ho prejudiced yung litigant by being informed of the promulgation kasi wala pa hong siyang i-appeal.
Parang bago po yan, parang may advance notice. Basta for as long as it's fair, everybody is given this advance digital notification siguro, Mr. President. Pero parang bago yan. Dati kasi we are mailed printed copies and then more or less same time period po natin natatanggap. And then doon nagbibilangan ng the time required to do some things, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, so lahat ng courts, meron po tayong disposition rate. Is there a desire by the courts, led by the Supreme Court, to increase and improve our disposition rate, Mr. President? Kasi ngayon, nag-hover lang siya sa 39%, meron pang 24 Sharia naman yan. So let's say, lagyan na natin sa 36% to 50%. Hanggang doon lang Ano po ba itong disposition rate? This is of the target?
Of the target ho.
Yes, so the target is if we use the figures from the Supreme Court, the target is 50% of its caseload, Mr. President. I do not know sa RTC kung how they set the target sa RTC and sa CA.
Sa RTC ho, maganda ho ang disposal rate nila. In 2022, they had a disposal rate of 98% out of 238,000 cases. Almost 235,000 were disposed of. And in previous years, 2019, 2020, there was an accomplishment rate of over 100%, 163%, 144%. Ganun din ho sa Metropolitan Trial Courts, Your Honor. 2023 so far, there's a 140% rate as of June. For 2022, there is a 156 accomplishment rate. For 2021, there's 121%. 2019, 28%. Municipal trial courts, 2019, 128%. 2020, 92%. 2022, 146%. And for 2023, 238% as of June, Your Honor. So, there's clearly an effort on the part of the judiciary to dispose of their cases.
Is the percentage based on the target, not on the caseload?
Opo.
Or caseload in the sense na yung pumasok for the year. So, meaning to say, Mr. President, maybe it's about time that we also now increase the target figures for the other courts. Kasi dapat ang isang metric din natin dyan is in and out How many new cases were added for a calendar year? Then ima-minus mo dun yung disposed. Therefore, kung positive pa yung figure, nadagdagan pa ang caseload. So every year, pataas na pataas ang caseload.
Yes, they're amenable to that, Your Honor.
There are courts, Mr. President, na there are RTCs na zero backlog.
Meron.
And what does that mean, Mr. President? Kung zero backlog, meron pa siyang hinahandle na cases, no? Yun, may live cases pa, trial, etc. Zero backlog means
Delayed meaning decide the reglementary period. Zero backlog means all their cases were decided within the reglementary periods provided by law. And although may pending cases sila, andun pa rin pasok pa rin siya dun sa reglementary period, which depending on what is the law provides for them to provide or to make a decision, Your Honor.
yung aging of cases po, Mr. President, kailangan may metric din siguro ng Supreme Court dyan Kasi tama, you have kept the case alive for so long, but when you now submit it for decision, you decide within the period allowed, so everything looks or appears normal, pasok ka, you are zero backlog court, but then a case has slept before your court for 5 years, 6 years, yun ang pendency. So, is the Supreme Court also looking at the aging of the cases, Mr.
Yes,
President?
Your Honor. That's the term they also use, yung aging of cases. And the Supreme Court has issued a resolution for them, for all aging cases to be resolved in 6 months, Your Honor.
Ano po ba ang masasabi nating normal pendency of a civil case, of a criminal case? So yung mga kababayan natin, kunyari, kasi ako po, siyempre being a politician, kung minsan nagsispeech tayo on the justice system or on the condition of our society, meron po ako standard joke. Ang standard joke ko na yung a day in court ngayon na due process, naging a decade in court. So, please correct me now if I exaggerated my joke. What is the average pendency of a civil case or of a criminal case at the trial level, Mr. President?
They're trying to have different innovations for different types of cases, Your Honor. So sa criminal cases, they're trying to do the continuous trial. Dito naman ho sa civil cases, meron na daw silang bagong rules on civil procedure. So 6 months na ang pendency of a civil case, Your Honor.
6 months na lang. From filing and then yes.
Kung susundin daw lahat ng timelines, but many times
Yes.
it's off. Sometimes alam naman ho natin to, Your Honor. It's also the litigants
Yes.
who ask for extension because sometimes the witnesses are not available, or sometimes because of their workload. So, putting those aside, the desired is 6 months, Your
Yes,
Honor.
but there's an ideal now being pushed na, Mr. President. So, that's maganda po yan. Magandang development po yan kasi delay.
Tapos, this goes to what you were adverting to earlier regarding yung mga access to justice. Pag small claims ho, pag below 2 million, dapat 1 month tapos na daw ho yun. So, that's one. Those are some of the things they're trying to do.
So at least po yung may mga aspirations po tayo, and the parameters can be found in writing in the circulars of the Supreme Court.
That's correct.
Okay, understandable naman po yan na hindi naman eksakto, but more or less kung sinabi ng Supreme Court na 6 months is our target at umabot ng 6 years, medyo hindi lang violation of the words of the circular but also of the spirit behind the circular. I mean, sobra-sobra na po yun. But 6 months naging 1 year, debatable pa, baka pwede pa. Pero, opo. So,
Yes, correct, Your Honor. And it can even be grounds for possible disciplinary action, actually.
so gano'n. Oh, yes, ito po yun. Magandang point po yan. Yun po may mga reklamo sa ating judicial system. Let us say, kasi nga, alam na natin yung mga reklamo, di ba? Delay, abuse, sometimes corruption, or lugi ang mahihirap. Meron ba tayong pwedeng takbuhan na kasi ang Filipino culture, takot tayo magsumbong kasi mababalikan tayo, nabebueltahan tayo. That's why kami nga rito sa Senate, may yung bagong idea ni Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, yung ONTA. Sa tax naman yon, para kung may reklamo naman sa tax, takbo ka sa isang office na ONTA. Siya ngayon nangaharap, nakatago yung nagre-reklamo. So, like sa police ka 2 days ago, tinanong ko naman sila, saan naman tumatakbo ang merong mga reklamo laban sa police, marami. Pwedeng diretso sa police, pwedeng sa NAPOLCOM, pwedeng sa PLED. So, in the judiciary, Mr. President, is there already a system sana takbuhan ng taong bayan kung may reklamo tayo related to our judicial system?
Yes, there's a Judicial Integrity Board, Your Honor, composed of retired justices, where complaints against different courts can be brought and lodged, Your Honor.
And more or less, the anonymity of the complainants are preserved, Mr. President?
If needed, yes, Your Honor. And the proceedings are kept secret also, Your Honor.
Is the Judicial Integrity Board accessible to the people located in Mindanao?
For now sa Manila, but it's open to the public, Your Honor.
Sana well-publicized po ang, let us say, accessing it through online means. So kahit na...
They also receive online complaints, Your Honor.
Pero, madali po hanapin ang mga contact numbers po ng Judicial Integrity Board.
Opo, opo.
Search words. Basta kung search words po, lalabas po lahat ng contact details.
Nasa Supreme Court website daw.
Okay, so,
Opo.
so gano'n na lang po ang ano. So siguro, kung yung taga Mindanao, makakonsulta ng isang abogado, isang knowledgeable people, matutulungan yung may reklamo, magsisearch sa online, makikita yung contact number, email address ng Judicial Integrity Board, pwede nang initiate na ngayon yung process of complaining. Opo,
Yes,
thank
Your
you. Thank you for that, Mr. President. Okay. Yung pong kaso ni Senator Laila de Lima, pending na ilang taon na yun? Pending na ng 6 years yata to sa Regional Trial Court. Is this normal, Mr. President? 6 years, 9 months, Mr. President.
There are, of the 3 cases, 2 have already been disposed of. The one is pending trial, Your Honor.
Siguro tignan na rin po ng Supreme Court yung yung phenomenon of judges inhibiting from cases. Dapat stricto yun eh. Ang nag-inhibit ka lang hindi dahil sa mainit yung issue, kasi dapat judge ka nga eh. I mean, pumasok ka nga sa ganyang job description kasi dapat kaya mo yung mga mainit na kaso kahit politically loaded. But you will inhibit kung close relative mo yung ang party because baka pagdudahan ka. I think that's the... can't the Supreme Court be more strict in this inhibition phenomenon, Mr. President?
Yes, they agree with you, Your Honor. In fact, they're now asking the judges to furnish them with the orders of inhibition. Dati hindi yata kasi. So ngayon, dati wala man lang it was just really a decision made unilaterally, the inhibition. But now, the Supreme Court is now monitoring that phenomenon you're speaking of, Your Honor.
Because it's unfair. It's actually unfair to the parties involved, especially those deprived of liberty. Unfair eh. Medyo, well at any rate, Mr. President, yung si Dr. Agbayani, for example, was this a case decided with finality by the Supreme Court? Si Dr. Iggy Agbayani, a well-known orthopedic surgeon, yeah, who died by heart attack due to heart attack in the Manila City Jail.
I'm sorry, I had to be updated. I'm not aware of the case. But now, apparently his lawyer failed to file the appropriate pleading in the lower court. So it was sustained at the first appellate level. But the Supreme Court, it was sustained, but the penalty was reduced, Your Honor. So that's the Agbayani case, Your Honor.
If our resource persons and justices are aware of the details, it was reduced to what? How long?
From 2 years imprisonment to 1 year, Your Honor.
1 year. Because I think he has been in the city jail for a couple of months yata, three months. And he was organizing a medical mission kasi talagang grabe ang condition po ng jails natin and our prisons, Mr. President. What is the role of the, Mr. President, if we can ask the Supreme Court being the highest court, what's the role of the Supreme Court and the other courts in the desire to decongest our jails and our prisons, Mr. President? Manood kayo sa Netflix, meron dun world's toughest prisons. Andun ang mga 2 or 3 Philippine jails nandun. And hindi tayo tough dahil sa tough yung mga prisoners natin. It's the system daw, the system and the living standards which are tough, Mr. President. Not the people incarcerated. Mababait nga sila eh.
Magaling ho sumayaw yung ibang
Correct.
prisoners. But anyway, seriously speaking, Mr. President, on December 6 and 7, it's good that you asked that because there's a National Jail Decongestion Summit spearheaded by the Supreme Court, which is aimed at addressing the overcrowded prison conditions facing persons deprived of liberty, or PDLs, in the country. This is jointly organized with the Department of Interior and Local Government and the Bureau of Jails, or DOJ. DOJ, BJMP, Your Honor. So, December 6 to 7, ho yun. National Jail Decongestion Summit, ho. Apo.
I hope details yung mga...
Yes, they'll be happy to furnish you. And perhaps
will
you want to send a representative
will come
to
out
attend.
in the summit, details talaga, what to do, things to do, ganon.
Yes, they're looking for specific recommendations for action, Your Honor. And they're also advocating for the imposition of lower bail to the indigent accused. This expedites the release of qualified PDLs and their reintegration into the community. Meron din pong to prioritize, they have given, nabanggit natin yung to dispose of aging cases and also criminal cases, Your Honor. This aids the disposition of cases kung ma-prioritize yung mga ibang criminal cases. And the use of AI to improve operations, they're looking into this also. In the preparation of the TSN, or the transcript of some stenographic notes, in digitizing judgments, the Supreme Court has also implemented the following, Your Honor: the launching of the case decongestion program in April 2021, and amendments to the internal rules of the Supreme Court specifically to address concerns of docket congestion, Your Honor.
Is the Supreme Court entertaining the possibility that we may be still detaining people who have served already fully their sentences? Is that a possibility?
As long as that's known to the court, the directive of the Supreme Court is immediate release of those persons deprived of liberty, Your Honor. But you know, there's anecdotal evidence na, I remember in previous years we discussed this. I'm not sure if it was with Your Honor. Pero yung iba ayaw umalis dahil komportable na ho sila doon at minsan ayaw na talaga nila umalis. So,
As a matter of policy, should we continue to hold or allow the stay in prison of people who should no longer be in prison? Dapat hindi na yata justice, di ba? You're out. You must be out.
yeah, I think although we allow it as perhaps a measure of mercy, but perhaps looking at it from a systemic standpoint, I think that's what you mean, is that talagang dapat pakawalan na ho kasi usually he may be, his presence there may be prejudicial to...
I-raise ko po sa Bucor yan, actually.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Kasama rin sa budget, Mr. President, 70 pesos a day plus congestion.
That's for Bucor,
plus,
Bucor and BJMP. Opo.
Plus the security issues. Okay. Pero, Mr. President, are the courts passive when it comes to this issue na searching for prisoners or people in detention who have served out fully their sentences, and then is the court passive? Maghintay lang siya that it will be brought to its attention. Ang problema kasi, most likely this person is an indigent person, walang resources, walang abogadong nakatutok, and then meron pa daw cases na sasabihin sa kanya na wala ang record mo, nawawala. So kung kung hindi na ngayon malaman if that person has served his sentence kasi nawawala ang record, I think that is the fault of the state. And therefore, the state forfeits its right to detain him, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, I missed the
Well,
case.
yung
Your
muna,
Honor.
number one is,
I was trying to
what is-
solicit.
what is the attitude of the court? Should it be passive in this
No.
this issue, or it should be proactive, Mr. President?
They admit that they should be proactive, Your Honor. In fact, according to Justice Marquez, Chief Justice Esmundo was in Pasay City Jail and in Bilibid recently to inquire about the stay of the conditions, the stay of the prisoners in those jails. So definitely, pag may nakitang overstaying na doon, yun, pinapakawalan na ho talaga yun.
Apo, sige. Okay, that's a good development. Hindi namin alam po 'yun. Na news ba 'yun? Na pumunta si Chief Justice. It's the Chief Justice already going to the Bilibid prison. Maganda po 'yun. And Mr. President, itong nabanggit po natin na we have capital outlay of 1.2 billion. Kasama na po ba dito yung Hall of Justice ng Cagayan de Oro City? Kasi ang sunog po dun sa amin, January 30, 2015. 2023 na po, wala pa po silang ganun po katagal for us to build the Hall of Justice. 8 years, wala pa.
Indeed, the one you mentioned is already part of the judiciary complex of Cagayan de Oro. That's already being implemented, Your Honor. So hindi na siya kasama dun sa 1.2 billion item for next year.
So
Kasi ongoing na ho yun.
ongoing na po. Ano
Opo,
pong
opo.
time of completion natin?
Well, they're going to start construction next year. They're going to bid it out, and then they estimate around 2 to 3 years for completion.
So it's a complex, magkasama na si CA siguro and si RTC and
CA and lower courts, Your
and
Honor.
lower courts. Okay. So, Mr. President, tapos na sana ako pero meron tayong phoned-in question, Mr. President. Pag sinabi kong phoned-in, among colleagues po yun. Ito pong Parmali case, okay, just for our education, nandito na rin naman po ang Supreme Court eh. What are the details of this decision of the latest decision of the Supreme Court? Is the Supreme Court in any way curtailing the right of House of Congress, especially the Senate, to cite resource persons or witnesses in contempt and then punish them accordingly, Mr. President?
Would the sponsor need a few minutes to ask about that issue? Because that is a request also by our other colleagues. So maybe I can give him a 1-minute suspension so he can confer
Organize yung talks.
with justices. Session suspended for 1 minute.